I told my wife, Sarah, that my seminar had wrapped up a day earlier than expected, but I couldn't change my flight, so I'd be getting home Tuesday night. She sounded a bit irritated that I'd be gone one more night, but said she was excited to see me. After thinking it over for about an hour, I realized I'd been away from home a lot lately. I wanted to show Sarah, my wife of 17 years, that she still came first. So I made a last-minute decision to head to the airport and see if I could make something happen. At first, it felt like a long shot. But then I noticed a flight going into a different airport, one I'd never used before. Normally, I fly into one that's about an hour north of our home, but this one was nearly 2 hours south. Still, I figured it was worth it. There was a flight leaving in 30 minutes. I walked up to the counter, expecting some hassle, but surprisingly, buying the ticket was quick and easy. An hour later, I was in the air. 3 hours after that, I landed. I rented a car and figured I'd be walking through our front door right around midnight. Part of me imagined Sarah would be over the moon to see me early. I even started listing reasons in my head why this would be a sweet surprise. I decided not to call her. I wanted to see her reaction firsthand. But when I got home, just before midnight, the house was dark. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. That struck me as odd. I brought my bag inside and started unpacking, trying not to jump to conclusions. But I couldn't shake the weird feeling. I called her cell. She picked up on the third ring. I greeted her casually, acting like I was just checking in. She told me it was past midnight, and she'd already gone to bed. She promised she'd be at the airport at 6 a.m. to pick me up. That stopped me cold. If she was in bed, where? I asked her where she was, mentioning that I'd tried calling the house phone and got the answering machine. She said she was in bed and the house phone was down, that a repair guy was coming the next day. I was standing in our living room, the same one she was supposedly asleep above. There was no way she was upstairs. It didn't make sense. I didn't want to believe she was lying, but the pieces didn't fit. So I told her I wouldn't be on that 6 a.m. flight after all, that I'd be staying a few extra days and would call when I had a better idea of my plans. She told me she missed me and asked me to come home as soon as I could. I told her I couldn't wait either, and we ended the call. But just before she hung up, I swear I heard a faint laugh in her voice. After that, I called the house line myself. It rang like normal. I considered answering it, maybe even saying something sarcastic to myself for kicks, but I couldn't find the humor in it anymore. I walked upstairs and searched the room, under the bed, in the closet, any place someone might hide. But the truth was sinking in fast. My wife wasn't home. And that meant someone else had been lying in our bed. I'm not a detective or a genius, just a guy in sales. But my gut had never failed me before, and right then, it was screaming that something was wrong. The next morning, I got up early and parked the rental car across the street to keep it out of view. Around 7 a.m., I saw Sarah's car pull up. But she wasn't driving. A man was behind the wheel. I ducked into the small coat closet by the front door and left the door cracked just enough to see through. Sarah unlocked the door and let him in. She told him she needed to change and get her stuff for work, plus clothes for the next day so she wouldn't have to come home again in the morning. He chuckled and said he'd help, if he could sleep with her again. She teased him, saying she might have to fire him for being late, and joked about how he seemed to love the fact that she worked under him. He laughed, and made a comment about how his wife thought Sarah was the perfect assistant. I couldn't help but wonder what his wife would think now. As far as I remembered, this guy had only been working with her for a few weeks. He came off as arrogant and smug. He went on, saying he'd already told his wife about Sarah, pointing out that Sarah was his wife's mother's age but in way better shape. Then he laughed and added that once his wife met Sarah, he'd probably have to fire her anyway. He also mentioned telling his wife that he'd be looking at houses this week, so she shouldn't expect him back at the hotel for a couple of days. Sarah came back downstairs, looking beautiful. And then they kissed. It wasn't a quick kiss. It was the slow, hungry kind. The kind that tells you everything you need to know. I felt this overwhelming urge to grab the nearest umbrella from the hallway and storm out there, just to make a scene, just to let them know I wasn't some clueless idiot. Instead, I listened, heart pounding, as Jeff suggested Sarah spend the next night with him. They could go out for dinner, he said, and be back by 8 p.m. Maybe afterward he'd show her the lodge. He'd already talked to the owner about it. Sarah giggled and went along with it, teasing him about what kind of tour he had in mind. Then she threw out a line that made my stomach twist. "What if my husband comes home early?" Jeff didn't miss a beat. He told her not to worry, that I'd call him before showing up. Said I always gave him a day's notice. If I didn't call that day, it meant I wouldn't be coming home the next. Sarah seemed satisfied with that answer. She joked that I was like a trained SEAL, and even if something went wrong, I'd probably just hand Jeff a cold beer and say sorry for the trouble. Jeff laughed and called me a pushover, adding that if the roles were reversed, his own wife would absolutely lose her mind. Sarah laughed too, saying most guys stayed loyal because of fear, not love. Jeff admitted he usually wasn't scared of his wife, but if he ever cheated and she found out, yeah, he said he'd be lucky to survive it. Then he added that she was in Houston, which made him feel safe enough. That was it. I couldn't listen anymore. As they walked out of the room, my face burned hot. My heart pounded. Not only was Sarah cheating on me, she clearly didn't respect me. Maybe she even disliked me. I sat there, trying to process it all, trying not to fall apart. But then, a plan started forming. I remembered something she had mentioned in passing, about her new boss being transferred from the company's headquarters in Houston. I needed to confirm his name. So I made a few calls. I phoned the receptionist at Sarah's office, played it cool, and asked a few careful questions. It worked. She told me everything I needed to know. His name was Jeffrey Ross. Married. 2 teenage kids. His wife and kids were still in Texas until the school year wrapped up, but they'd be joining him in Springfield soon. In the meantime, he was house hunting after work each night. That was all I needed. I looked up Ross in the Houston online directory. 3 listings came up. On my very first call, I struck gold. I asked the woman who answered if she was Mrs. Jeffrey Ross. She said yes, cautiously, and asked how she could help. I made up a name, Don Watson, and said I worked at Halifax, the same company her husband did. I told her we were planning a little surprise celebration for Jeff and wanted to include her. I mentioned round-trip tickets to Springfield were already arranged, all expenses covered. She sounded genuinely delighted. Asked about the date. I avoided being specific, just said it was happening the next night. I gave her the flight number, and told her someone would be there to pick her up. I asked her to keep it a secret from Jeff to preserve the surprise, and she promised she would. Next, I started calling Sarah's friends and family. I told them Sarah had gotten a big promotion, and we were throwing her a surprise party. Everyone was excited, thrilled even, and totally on board with keeping it hush-hush. I told them to arrive at our house by 7 p.m. sharp to help keep Sarah there when she got home. I didn't want her running off. Then I called up a local catering service and arranged for food and drinks to be set up on the veranda beside our living room, right by the pool. That had always been Sarah's dream, to have a party out there, fairy lights and all. I told the caterers the house might be empty when they arrived, so they should go around back and start setting things up. Everything had to be ready by 6:30 p.m. The next day, I got to the airport half an hour early. As passengers came through the baggage claim area, I kept an eye out for a woman traveling alone. I spotted 2 women walking without anyone waiting for them. I approached one and asked if she was Mrs. Ross. Just as I was speaking, I heard a woman's voice behind me. "That's me," she said, stepping forward. She was stunning, like movie star gorgeous. I almost forgot what I was supposed to say. I introduced myself as Ron and told her my wife worked for her husband. She looked at me a little suspiciously, but I kept my cool. I needed to think fast. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked to Mrs. Ross that people often said I married an older, larger woman, but really, It was just that my wife had more experience and, well, more to love. She paused for a second, then smiled. That little grin was all the reassurance I needed that she wasn't creeped out. We grabbed her bags and headed to the parking lot. When we pulled up to my place around 6:30, I explained that the gathering was an outdoor party to celebrate both her husband and my wife's birthday. As guests began arriving, the catering team was finishing up on the veranda. I was genuinely impressed. Everything looked flawless, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. I hadn't realized a party like that could come together so smoothly. By 7:30, all the guests I invited had arrived. I'd asked everyone to park behind the church a few blocks away so the driveway stayed clear. I told them I'd be hiding inside the house, and once the guests of honor arrived, I'd flip off the patio lights as a signal to quiet down. Our sliding glass doors opened right onto the veranda, covered with vertical blinds and heavy curtains we used in the winter. The blinds had one cord to open them side to side and another to spread them apart. The curtains were thick, perfect to hide behind. Just before 8 o'clock, I saw Sarah's car pull up in front of the house. I switched off the patio lights and slipped behind the curtains. I heard the front door open, followed by laughter. Sarah and Jeff. They were clearly having a good time. Jeff joked about finally having some private time together, saying how rare it was for them to be alone. Then I heard the rustle of clothes. Jeff helped Sarah out of her dress. She was wearing just a thong underneath. They were giggling, playfully teasing each other. Sarah pulled off her thong and made a joke about Jeff always being so frisky. He laughed and pushed her down, right into my favorite chair. That's when it started. At just the right moment, I flipped the switch. The lights blazed on. Sarah froze, stunned. Her first words were frantic. "What are you doing here?" I raised an eyebrow. "This is my house," I said coolly. "Check the deed, it's got my name on it." She stammered something about not expecting me home so soon. I nodded casually. "Yeah, well, surprise." Jeff, clearly caught off guard, started mumbling about needing to leave, that he had some things to take care of. I offered him a drink. That stopped both of them in their tracks. It took a second, but then I saw it on his face, the realization. Sarah had said I'd probably just hand him a beer and say sorry for the inconvenience. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I couldn't help but grin. Before Jeff could even answer, the sliding doors behind him opened, and in walked Mrs. Ross. With a large purse. Swinging it. She marched right in, her face a mixture of shock and fury. Jeff had no time to react. She clocked him so hard he stumbled backward 5 feet. And if that wasn't enough, in came Sarah's mom and her sister. Sarah, still naked, stood frozen as her mother let her have it. Told her to get dressed and, half joking, suggested she consider a new career in adult films given her recent performance. Sarah couldn't speak. Just stood there like a statue. Then I turned on the porch lights, and that's when she saw them, about 20 guests all standing outside, staring at her in disbelief. I walked outside like it was just another Friday evening, grabbed some potato salad and wings, then cracked open a beer from the fridge. Took a seat and watched the chaos unfold. Jeff tried to sit down like nothing happened, while Sarah scrambled to gather herself. But the damage was done. They'd made their choices. They were the ones who dragged everyone, friends, family, co-workers, into this mess. Honestly, it was better this way. Everyone got to see the truth, no more lies. Now we could all move forward, no more pretending. Eventually, things started calming down. One of Sarah's cousins helped Mrs. Ross get to a motel. Another cousin guided Jeff to his car and drove him off, hopefully far away. Sarah's mom asked if she wanted to go too, but she declined. Her mom sighed and said she understood if I was furious. She thought Sarah deserved every bit of the shame, but she was already suffering enough. They left. Sarah locked herself in the bathroom. I heard the shower running. Meanwhile, I stayed put, eating wings and sipping my beer like it was the best meal I'd ever had. And in that moment, I realized something. Every once in a while, everything aligns perfectly, and the plan actually works. After finishing my food, I started cleaning up. And trust me, cleaning up after a crowd like that, it took a while. I stuffed the leftovers into the fridge and freezer. It was already past midnight by the time I cracked open my last beer of the night and sat at the kitchen table, finally letting myself breathe. A few minutes later, Sarah walked in and sat down across from me. I looked at her, dead in the eye, and asked, "Are you happy now? Is this what you really wanted?" I wondered out loud how people start forming such twisted opinions about their partners. Had I done something to make her feel like this? Or had she made that decision all on her own? She shot back, reminding me of that time I got caught in an awkward situation with my boss, completely platonic, but apparently she hadn't let that one go. She asked sarcastically if I thought people would now assume she was some promiscuous woman. She was clearly trying to make a point, but it missed the mark. Then she snapped, accusing me of airing our dirty laundry in front of the whole neighborhood instead of just talking to her like a grown man. I smirked and asked, "Wait, so we do have a problem?" She went on to say she never meant to be cruel, never thought I'd actually find out about her and Jeff. That I'd only embarrassed her to hurt her on purpose. I raised an eyebrow. "Throwing a surprise party for my wife at our house is worse than sneaking around behind my back with your boss?" I asked. "I don't think many folks would agree with your take on that." And then she finally dropped the line I'd been waiting for, like a cheap punchline at the end of a bad joke. She blamed me. Said if I'd been around more, none of this would have happened. That I hadn't paid her enough attention, and Jeff just filled the gap. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, belly-deep laugh. She was actually trying to flip the whole thing and make me apologize. Unbelievable. She looked pathetic. I got up, headed to our room, closed the door behind me, and locked it. A wave of peace washed over me. I felt free. Emotionally unchained. And soon, legally too. A new life was just around the corner, and I was ready for it. Okay, now on to a different kind of disaster. Funny thing, right now, I should be at work. Instead, I'm sitting at my kitchen table, oddly calm, sipping a hot cup of coffee like nothing's wrong. I needed this moment. The warmth of the mug in my hands. The smell of the brew swirling through the room. Back when the kids were little, I'd wake up early just to have this kind of peace. It was like a ritual, a quiet hobby that grounded me. I'm Evan. Evan Johnson. Or I was happily married for 25 years. We have 4 kids. Our youngest just moved out last year, and after that, my wife Audrey started talking about how empty the house felt. Said she had a case of empty nest syndrome. I encouraged her to find something, anything, that would bring her joy again. Well, it seems she found it. About an hour ago. I don't know his name, but she kept calling him Stallion. That's what echoed through the house. Stuff like, "Come on, Stallion, I know you can do it." Normally, when I brewed coffee, Audrey would float down the stairs before it even finished dripping. But this time? She hadn't noticed a damn thing. She was busy. I could hear her moaning, telling him how much better he was than her spineless husband. And him? He played right into it. "Oh my God, you're so much better," he gasped. I thought about switching the safety off on my handgun. Not because I wanted to use it, but because, well, you never know. Her boyfriend was a cop. I knew that because his uniform, badge, and gear belt were all over my living room floor. Right next to Audrey's clothes. Their noises from upstairs were loud and unmistakable, groaning, bed springs creaking, the headboard slamming rhythmically against the wall. And they kept talking. She begged him to come over more often. Said once or twice a week wasn't enough. That they needed to figure something out. That was my wife, my partner of 25 years, up there saying that. And here I was, stuck in this absurd, surreal moment, wondering how the hell I got here. It was foolish. All of it. I headed out for work that morning, and forgot my briefcase. Actually, I didn't forget it exactly. I'd left it in the garage after pulling it out of the car to rescue our cat, Tabby, who'd crawled under the hood. That's what distracted me. Tabby's our second cat. Years ago, I learned the hard way why you're supposed to tap the hood before starting your car in the winter. Back then, we had Clarence. One cold morning, I cranked the engine without checking, and that was the last time Clarence made it to breakfast. There's nothing quite like the sound of a cat getting sucked into a fan belt at 1,000 RPMs. The screaming. The fur. It was unforgettable. Clarence wasn't the brightest, and clearly, either was I. You're never letting that weakling you call a husband touch you again, are you? No. Never again. I swear. That was Audrey's voice. My briefcase suddenly felt like the least important thing in the world. I figured I'd just leave it behind. But as luck would have it, I had to stop by a client's office, and he ended up giving me a lift home. When we turned onto my street, I saw it, a black and white police cruiser parked out front. My heart dropped like a rock. For a second, I panicked, thought maybe something awful had happened to Audrey. I pulled into the driveway a little too fast, nearly sideswiping her brand-new silver Lexus LS. Her prize garden gnome didn't survive the encounter. I didn't even close the car door behind me. I just ran inside. And that brings us here, me, sitting in the kitchen, trying to calm down with a cup of coffee, while upstairs. Take me now, stud. Make me feel good. Oh God, I've never felt anything this amazing. Yeah. It was unpleasant. Honestly, I wanted whiskey. But I needed my head clear. The moans and grunts were bad enough, but what really got to me were the words. The humiliation. Seeing them going at it in our bed was bad. But hearing Audrey call me spineless, and tell her lover he was so much better than Evan, that cut deep. Apparently, her little jabs really got the guy going, because the whole house started shaking. The bed, the walls, everything pulsed with the rhythm of betrayal. And yes, they used my side of the bed. I stood in the hallway, listening as Audrey, breathless and euphoric, rode him like a damn rodeo queen. That's when I made a beeline to the bathroom, dropped to my knees, and threw up my breakfast. Surprisingly, they didn't hear me, or smell it. I guess they were a little preoccupied. Even after all I'd heard and seen, a part of me still couldn't wrap my head around it. Audrey's 50. This guy couldn't have been more than 30. He was built like a personal trainer. And Audrey? Well, she wasn't exactly an Olympic athlete. And I'm no action hero, but come on, he couldn't find someone single? Someone not married for 25 years? The whole ordeal dragged on. After about 90 minutes, everything went silent. I figured they were taking a break. Then I heard Audrey sniff the air and go, "What's that smell?" There was a lot of scrambling after that. Closets, drawers, laundry baskets. They were definitely trying to clean up whatever mess they'd left behind. That's when I made a mental note to schedule a full STD panel. They saw me at the same time. Audrey gasped, face pale. The cop, Stallion, looked equally stunned. His eyes darted around the room. That's when he realized something. "My service piece," he muttered. "Gone," I said calmly. "Your boss took it with him when he left." His expression fell apart. The guy looked like he was about to evaporate. Then he dropped to the floor, stark naked under a tangled sheet, frantically digging through his clothes. "He took this too, my throwing arm." And then the real panic set in. The serial number had been removed. That's 5 to 7 years right there. Yeah. Turns out his boss was a real thoughtful guy. We had a nice little chat while Romeo and Juliet were upstairs playing acrobat. Audrey rushed to the window, scanning the street. Too late. Her lover's patrol car was long gone. "Your boss said you were pulling security at some construction site tonight. He figured you might need your uniform to walk home. Didn't think to leave you the car, though." And where was I during all this? Just sipping my coffee. "You could try calling your wife for a ride," I said. "But I don't think she's in the mood. That video hit her pretty hard." I'd emailed the video to her. Audrey's lover's wife, I mean. She was crying, mumbling something about her dad being the chief of police. Hard to make out, but that detail landed just fine. How could you do that to your kids? She asked through clenched teeth. She told me about them. You seem like you had a nice family. Despite the mess, I found myself almost enjoying it. Like I had a fish on the line, and now I was just reeling it in, nice and slow. I'd offer to have my wife drive you, I said to Stallion. But her car's been impounded. Audrey let out a sharp, high-pitched squeal. What? Yeah, I replied calmly. The police found a couple of ounces of unaccounted-for weed in the front seat. Sergeant Mark said they usually just write a ticket, if they do anything at all, but he figured they owed me something. You know, for the trouble. Don't worry, I added. They'll probably let you pick it up in a few days, after they've finished their forensics. Oh my God! Audrey moaned. It wasn't even a scream anymore. It was more like this slow, broken howl, like a wounded dog. Well, officer, I said, brushing crumbs off the table. Probably time to put your uniform back on and get going. So he did. Once Stallion finally left, Audrey sat across from me. She had that panicked, deer-in-headlights look, but her voice was steady enough. Please, Ev. I love you. It didn't mean anything. It was just a fling or something stupid. I tilted my head. Damn. I wish you told me that sooner. I was really starting to worry you'd fallen for him. I thought you were going to leave me. Had me thinking I overreacted. You know I love you, Evan. Of course I love you. Why would you even doubt that? Oh, I don't know, I said. Besides the whole cheating on me thing, moaning your lover's name in our bed, on my side of the bed, and calling me a stupid crayon-covered idiot, I guess there were a few red flags. Oh, come on, she said, rolling her eyes. That was just bedroom talk. Trying to get in the mood. Wait, she said, eyes narrowing. You said you overreacted. Evan, what did you do? That's when she started to get truly nervous. Her voice tightened. Her hands fidgeted in the sheet wrapped around her. Well, I said casually, I sent the video to our kids. She stared at me, mouth open. I just wanted them to meet their new stepdad, I added. Though you might want to give them a bit of time before you call, they seemed kind of upset. I thought they'd be happy for you. She covered her mouth. You didn't. I nodded. Oh, and one more thing, you probably already know your lover's wife works at the same company as you. Executive assistant to the CEO, I think she said. Don't worry, I asked her not to get you fired. You'll need that job, even if you end up transferring to Little Rock. I leaned back in my chair. Talk to my attorney too. Since you make more than me now, looks like you'll be paying me spousal support. Probably around $3,000 a month. Most guys wouldn't take it, but I'm not trying to be macho. I'm going to take a nice long fishing trip. A little break to heal. Just like that song, Deep Sea Senorita Fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. I paused for a second. Oh, and my lawyer wanted a photo of you. Something about needing it for your dad? Or maybe to check if any of the boys in blue had opinions. Anyway, I gave her the photo. Also sent a copy of the video to your parents. And your coworkers. And your Facebook friends seemed to enjoy it too. Lot of wow reactions. At that point, Audrey just sat on the floor, wrapped in the sheet, rocking slightly, tears dripping down her face as she whispered. This can't be happening. Okay, sweetheart, I said, standing up. Time to get dressed and pack a bag. Your parents should be here any minute. Pick me up? She asked, bewildered. Well, yeah, I said. You're going to need a place to stay. The house'll have to be sold as part of the divorce. Divorce? You seem confused, I said. That surprises me. What exactly did you think was going to happen when I found out? She didn't answer. For the next few minutes, it was dead silent upstairs. Occasionally I'd hear her sob or mutter something under her breath, like, son of a, or, why me? That's the thing about cheaters. They never expect to get caught. And when they do, they always cry. If it's such a terrible thing to get caught, maybe don't cheat. 10 minutes later, she came back downstairs. Fully dressed, but no suitcase in sight. Evan, honey, are we really? Yeah. We were really. I heard the crunch of tires as her parents' car pulled up out front. Goodbye, Audrey, I said, holding the door open for her like a gentleman. Because that's what I am, even when the world burns down around me. All right, that one was a ride. But let's keep going. This next one? Well, it caught me completely off guard. That evening was anything but normal. The house was silent, eerily silent. No laughter, no footsteps, nothing. My wife, Helen, and our kids were nowhere to be found. I'm Mike Lewis. Helen and I had been married for 11 years. So when I walked into a dead silent house, something didn't sit right. Then I saw it, a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. A note. Mike, I'm sorry. I can't tell you this in person, I'm too much of a coward. I've met someone else. I've fallen in love. The kids are with me and they're safe. The divorce papers are under this note. As you'll see, I'm not asking for anything. Helen. My whole world just dropped. I started pacing, cussing, rifling through the divorce papers. Eventually, I slumped into a kitchen chair, numb. She was taking nothing but the kids, their clothes, and a few toys. She was leaving me the house. The savings. Everything. But then I saw it. Tucked inside the papers was one last request. She wanted me to sign over parental rights. To let her new man adopt my children. That was the moment the pain turned into pure fury. At least now I knew who she'd run off with, Henry Carslake. I grabbed my phone and called her. Hey, Helen, I said flatly. Hi, Mike, she answered calm, like we were chatting about groceries. What's going on? I asked, though I already knew. She repeated what she wrote in the note. Met someone. Fell in love. Yeah, of course you did, I said bitterly. Because people just get up and walk out on a marriage one day. Just like that. Let me guess, this wasn't in our bed, right? Mike, she said, can we not do this with yelling and cursing? Please. Let's just be civil. So I hung up, took a shower, changed, and went out to eat because there was no way I could cook in that state. The food was okay, nothing special, but it filled me up. Then I hit a bar. I figured, after the day I'd had, I'd earned at least a couple of drinks. Henry Carslake. That was the guy. The same guy who owned Carslake Construction. I'd done a few freelance jobs for him in the past. He'd always been stiff, cold. Now I knew why. I sat at the bar nursing a beer when my buddy Paul walked in and spotted me. Mike? He said, surprised. Man, I almost didn't recognize you. What, you finally got a night off from the family? Something like that, I muttered. I told him everything, how I came home to a note and divorce papers, how Helen had moved in with Henry freaking Carslake. Paul's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Wait, that Carslake? Yup, I said. What a piece of work, he muttered. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna give her the divorce. She's not asking for anything. But she did ask for one more thing. What's that? Paul asked, clearly concerned. She wants me to let Henry adopt my kids. Paul's jaw tightened. You're kidding. Nope, I said. I tore that form in half and tossed it. That's never happening. Paul shook his head. That guy's scum. Yeah, well, I added. I was supposed to start a new job with him on Monday. That's not happening either. I didn't show up. Never got a call, not even a text. But the real twist? Word got out. Paul ran his mouth to the right people, and suddenly Henry found himself blacklisted. Local contractors started turning him down, one after another. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. Sure, he eventually found replacements, but they were all second-rate. His projects started falling apart. Quality dropped. His reputation went to hell. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. 3 months after that, Helen married Henry. They went on a honeymoon, and I agreed to take care of the kids for that week. Not for them, for me. Because a week with my children beat the hell out of weekends-only custody. But one night, my daughter Chloe, 10 years old at the time, asked me a question I'll never forget. "Daddy, why did you send us to live with Mom and Henry?" And that hit me harder than anything Helen ever wrote. "I didn't send you away," I told Chloe gently. "Your mom took you because, well, she doesn't love me anymore. If it were up to me, you'd still be here." I made it clear, it wasn't my decision. And I promised I'd talk to Helen about it. When Helen showed up to pick the kids up, she looked sun-kissed and cheerful, like she'd just come back from a spa day instead of a week-long honeymoon with the guy she left me for. I didn't hold back. "Stop lying," I told her. "Tell the kids the truth. If you don't, I will." I let her know that Chloe and Lee already understood I didn't ask her to take them. And if it came to it, I'd fight for custody. She didn't say anything, just rolled her eyes and walked off. Being a single dad after over a decade of marriage? It was jarring. I wasn't used to the silence. My buddies tried setting me up on dates, but I wasn't interested. I wanted real love, not Tinder dinners or awkward small talk over coffee. That's when life tossed me a curveball. A couple named Gary and Emily had moved in next door not long after Helen left. Their house needed some TLC, but they got a great deal on it. Emily worked as a secretary, and Gary was a retired army guy. Good folks. We'd exchange small talk whenever we crossed paths. Then Gary had a sudden medical emergency at work. Paramedics got there fast, but it was too late. A subdural hematoma, the doctors said. He was gone. Emily was crushed. With her parents vacationing in Europe, she was alone. I walked her home after everything settled down, poured us each a drink, and just sat with her as she sobbed and shared what came next for her. Eventually, she fell asleep on my couch. I grabbed a blanket, tucked her in, and crashed in the chair nearby, just in case she woke up. The next morning, as Emily was quietly leaving, Helen showed up to drop off the kids. "Well, good to see you're not wasting time, Mike," she said with a smug smirk. I stared at her. "Come on, Helen. Her husband just died." Helen glanced away and turned her attention to the kids. Later, I explained to Chloe and Lee why Emily had been at the house. Chloe looked sad. Lee didn't quite get it. A few days later, Emily invited me to Gary's funeral. I went, of course. Thankfully, the UK mortgage system took care of things. Her house was covered. But money doesn't fix grief. After the service, her parents came up to me. I promised them I'd keep an eye on Emily. Aside from coworkers, I was pretty much her only friend here. I offered to help out around her house, fix small things, keep it livable. The next time Helen came by, she stayed in the car. That suited me just fine. Emily and I spent more time together over the following months, not romantically, just as friends leaning on each other. One afternoon, about a year later, I overheard Lee talking to Emily in the garden. "Lee, don't bother her too much," I called out. "It's okay," Emily replied, smiling as she hung laundry on the line. I asked her if she'd like to come over for dinner that night. Lee's eyes lit up. He really wanted her to join us. Dinner was simple, but warm. Emily helped cook, and it was obvious she knew her way around a kitchen. After we ate, she helped clean up, then sat with us for a while before heading home. As she left, I thanked her. That's when Chloe grinned at me. "Is Emily your girlfriend?" I chuckled. "No, sweetie. She's just a friend. A neighbor." But deep down, I wished she was my girlfriend. I kept that to myself. No need to confuse the kids. That Sunday, when Helen came by, I knew she'd hear about Emily joining us for dinner. And sure enough, the next time she picked up the kids, she was suddenly very interested in my neighbor. "She's just a friend," I told her. "And what I do now is none of your business." Helen made some comment about not getting everything she wanted in the divorce. I reminded her she left me for a guy with deep pockets, and if Henry wanted kids so badly, maybe he should have had his own instead of trying to take mine. I made it clear, He may have taken my wife, but he wasn't taking my children. Helen pouted and walked off. I just smiled. A year later, I hadn't seen much of Emily. I'd been slammed with work. My buddy Paul was rewiring a house for a young couple and asked me to quote a complete plumbing overhaul. My bid got accepted, so the next few weeks were a whirlwind of late nights and busy mornings. While working with Paul, he kept me updated on Henry Carslake. Apparently, Henry still had to hire out-of-town crews. Most local tradesmen wanted nothing to do with him. When the job wrapped up and things calmed down, I finally had a free weekend. I asked Emily to dinner. She said yes. We set the date for Saturday night. When I walked into the restaurant behind Emily, I nearly forgot how to breathe. She was petite, with this edgy pixie cut that somehow made her look both sweet and confident. Her dress hugged her figure just right, and for the first time, I felt something more than friendship stirring in me. Dinner went smoothly. We talked for hours, diving deep into our pasts, our hopes, everything in between. When I walked her to her door afterward, she turned, smiled, and before I could even say goodnight, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a timid kiss either. It was passionate. It left me breathless. She pulled back, grinned, and said, "We should do this again. See where it leads." Then she kissed me softly on the cheek and went inside. We did go out again. And that time? It led to us spending the night together. Emily, despite her small frame, was full of fire and affection. It wasn't just physical, it was something deeper. Real. Over the next few months, we grew closer. She eventually sold her house and moved in with me. The kids loved her, and I could tell they were already talking to Helen about it. Of course, Helen wasn't thrilled. She didn't want me, but she sure didn't like seeing someone else want me. A year after our first night together, Emily and I got married. The kids told Helen. She just snorted and turned away. Emily and I eventually had 2 boys together, Gary and Robert. By then, Chloe and Lee were old enough to visit on their own, which meant I didn't have to deal with Helen nearly as much. Thank God for that. Time passed. Life settled. Then one day, Chloe came to me, beaming. Her boyfriend Josh had proposed the night before. I was over the moon. I offered to help with the wedding, financially and otherwise. Chloe thanked me, said they thought they didn't need help, but then told me Henry had offered to pay for everything, on one condition. He wanted to walk her down the aisle. Chloe refused. So Henry pulled his offer. She was devastated. I was furious. I wanted to wring Henry's neck. Emily, as always, was my rock. She quietly offered to use the money from the sale of her old house to cover the costs. I hesitated, it was her money. But she insisted. So I told Chloe the good news. We'd cover everything. No strings attached. Chloe cried happy tears. We set a budget and somehow managed to give her the wedding she dreamed of, without going over. The next day, Chloe told me Henry was fuming. Helen was clearly sour about it, too. Then one afternoon, Lee showed up in our backyard without warning. "I want to stay here tonight," he said. "I can't take the arguing anymore." Emily asked if it was still about the wedding. Lee shook his head. "Nah, it's something else." Then he dropped the bomb. Apparently he'd overheard Henry and Helen in the bedroom, and let's just say, things weren't going well. Henry wasn't exactly holding up his end, if you get my drift. Emily and I exchanged a glance and stifled our laughter. Poetic justice, I thought. She left me for a man who couldn't deliver, literally. Lee stayed with us that night. On the big day, Chloe and Josh's wedding, Helen looked tense. Chloe told her flat out that she and Henry would be sitting behind Emily and me during the ceremony. The church service went off without a hitch. At the reception, I agreed to let Helen sit at the top table. Henry, on the other hand, ended up with Emily, Gary, Robert, and Lee. After the speeches, the caterers cleared a few tables for dancing. Chloe and Josh opened the floor with their first dance. Emily and I joined them. Even Helen and Henry joined in. Later, I found myself at the bar. Gary and Robert were talking with one of the bridesmaids and her kids. Lee was coaxing Emily into dancing, and I encouraged him to go for it. That's when Helen approached me, drink in hand, cheeks flushed, clearly buzzed. She started talking about Emily. How does she still look so young? She asked, slurring a bit. She's had 2 boys and she's still tiny. What is she, like a size 4? I shrugged. We're divorced, Helen. You don't get to comment on my life anymore. But she didn't stop. Her dress is too tight. Her hair's too short. And honestly, Mike, I don't get the appeal. I turned and looked her in the eye. Emily's more of a woman than you ever were, I said. She loves me. She makes me laugh. And yeah, she knows how to make me feel like a man. Something you stopped doing a long time ago. Helen looked stunned. That's when Henry walked up, overhearing the tail end. I looked at them both. You left me because you thought you were trading up. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. Doesn't matter. I've got a good life now, a better one. A real partner. 4 amazing kids. And peace. I walked away before they could say anything. Back on the dance floor, Emily and I moved slowly to the music. She looked up at me. What was that back at the bar? She asked, curious. Kiss me, I said. She did, right in view of Helen. When we pulled apart, I smiled over at my ex-wife. She turned away and headed for another drink. I looked back at Emily, holding her hand. Yeah. I definitely traded up.